read for us and for all of you to come. I think. Exactly, and I don't know, I sometimes write a note to Rekha and say, I know I don't do it often, but that was a great piece you had today. And so I thought, I heard this one, so we thought it was time to come together collectively and say thank you. So, plus the fact that she's got a wonderful book, and it's holiday time, and I've got my eye on 2 of them for my daughters. I thought this was a nice time to come and do that. And let me just quickly say, would AFSC staff, any AFSC staff in the room? There's Jody and Katie and Sandra and you and myself. And we're just delighted to have you. But also there's just lots of, this is really, I think, something that the whole peace and justice community wants to express to you. So thank you, and we'll
thank you. Thank you so much, Kathleen. I must say, I was just talking to some people earlier. It has been such a nasty, contentious period recently, both with the election and all of the negative campaigning and advertising and money that came pouring in from Koch brothers and whatever other corporate conglomerates, and then this police abuse and grand jury's failures to indict, and now torture in the Middle East and elsewhere, and you just kind of don't know what's happening. My hate mail has been overflowing lately, so I just feel so good to be among kindred spirits in this room. Every time I come here, I leave feeling energized. Your timing is perfect. I was thinking, maybe it's too close to the holidays, and the voice finales are tonight. People might be busy with other things, but I am
not us.
So pleased that you.
Why would you be getting hate mail?
What's that?
Why would you be getting hate mail? I just want to interject.
Well, I might actually have a couple with me. I'll read them to you. You can judge for yourself.
Sherry.
People don't like what I say necessarily, and they kind of wish that I wouldn't say it.
That's their problem.
One.
That's why we like it.
Okay. This is one that came after the election. Yeah. Ms. Basu, quit whining. And she says, November 6th article, that was obviously post-election. Harkin is out counting his money. Many of us women did vote for Ernst and not baby-face mama boy Braley. Mama in her short shorts? Good grief. Now, was anyone here aware of Bruce Braley's mother being in short shorts? Because I sure never saw anything like that. Mama, can you speak to that? He was on the Braley stuff. Short shorts, good grief. We who have farmed, raised livestock, owned over-the-road trucks are not the dumbbells you city folk think. I don't pretend to understand people of India.
Oh, that's a slam.
But I understand what Americans want and expect. You apparently don't have a clue about real Iowans. So quit criticizing real people. Speak for yourself. You do not represent Iowa women. You and your views ruin the paper underlined.
Oh.
Maybe you should buckle up. I think she means buck up. People are sick of your biased opinions. A faithful register reader for how much longer? Question mark. So that's just a little example. I could read you more. There's this other battle I've been having with this chap who back in February announced with a lot of grandeur that he was quitting taking the paper because of my columns. He said, I've had it, and he wrote a letter to the editor and said, this just does it, Basu's last column, and I'm done with the paper. We've been loyal subscribers for however many years, but can't stand it anymore. So part of me thought, that's so sad and everything, and the other part thought, frankly, because this guy has been harassing me forever, good riddance. But then he rears his head again recently and starts badgering me about something I wrote recently. I think it had to do with police abuses. And he was writing to the editor, and he wanted an apology on the front page. And it was about Ferguson. It was post after the grand jury. And so, then he didn't like what the editor wrote back to him, so he was badgering me again. So I wrote back and said, respectfully, I thought you had quit the page. Back in February, so I'm kind of surprised to see, I was sorry to see you go, but I respected the fact that if it gave you high blood pressure in my column, then you didn't have to read it. I said, but I just want to know, why do you continue to do something that makes you feel bad? I mean, if that upset to you. So then, and I have this whole conversation going on back and forth, the paper trail. So he says, well, I will read whatever I feel like reading, and it's not for you to judge what I should read. So anyway, that's the level, that's the mentality that's out there sometimes. So I am going to read to you a little bit, I think I'll read the introduction to this book. I'm assuming most of you haven't read it, about why I wrote it. It's a compilation of columns that I've written over 20 years for the Des Moines Register. About women in particular. And before I was a columnist full-time, before I was a journalist at all, I was in academia. And my first master's degree was in political economy. And I studied and wrote about and talked about a lot of these issues about, for example, the feminization of poverty or sexual harassment and the politics of rape from a theoretical and kind of an academic perspective. But I had never really seen up close how it works. How victims are re-victimized by the system, how these good old boy cultures out, especially in smaller parts of the state, can conspire to actually take the side of the abuser rather than the abused. And how, when a woman gets divorced, her standard of living just absolutely plummets because of financial unfairness in the system and so many other things. Women... There's one woman who had spent her entire life fighting to get back child support, I think something like $27,000, and her husband kept going to jail. He was convicted as a felon. He went to prison, but he kept hiding his money in different ways. And, I came to see that Iowa had child support at that time, and it still does have something like that. How does it happen when even the state is involved and it's supposed to garnish your wages and whatnot? People find ways to get around it. So it's really been an eye-opener for me, seeing some of these things up close and how they work. But what has been very inspiring is that women have stood up for themselves and, found a voice as a result of often having to bump up against some kind of institutional inequality. And they've learned that they have the power to take on systems, and often that results in change. So that's really what the book applauds and celebrates. And so I'll read you the introduction, and then I'll read a couple of columns. So, 2 decades ago, I moved to Iowa armed with a New Yorker's sense of absolutes, intending to write commentaries on race, gender, and human rights. I was accustomed to activists pounding on reporters' doors to publicize their causes. So when a corporate sponsor of Planned Parenthood pulled its support from rural health clinics around Iowa under pressure from anti-abortion groups, it was surprising to hear scarcely a word uttered in protest. When a local judge addressing a judicial conference made an appalling joke about how a woman's anatomy could be used, people shrugged it off. And an effort to add an equal rights amendment to the state's constitution was regarded as nitpicky and quietly went down in defeat. Quote, "Where is Des Moines women's anger about social issues?" demanded one of my first columns. I learned the state had its paradoxes. In some ways, Iowa was ahead of others in equal rights laws. Mixed-race couples could marry here when they could not in Nebraska. Iowa's Carrie Chapman Catt had led the campaign to ratify the 19th Amendment, giving America's women the right to vote. Des Moines' Edna Griffin stood up to racial segregation 7 years before Rosa Parks spearheaded the Montgomery bus boycott. And in my years here, Iowa has pioneered the nation's first anti-stalking law and recognized same-sex marriage in advance of most states. I was told that women's advocacy here isn't necessarily in your face or on a picket line. It was in the feminist philanthropy of author and women's art collector Louise Naum and the principled leadership of Mary Louise Smith, the first woman to head the Republican National Committee. Still, Iowa today shares with only Mississippi the status of never having elected a woman to Congress or to the governor's office. Now, of course, we know that that's changed.
Joni Ernst is
Not quite in the way many of us had envisioned.
the senator-elect.
Began to quietly share with me their experiences of being sidelined, exploited, or rendered invisible. One high-powered businesswoman whispered that she almost couldn't contain her rage, but couldn't safely express it. I met women waging bitter child support battles whose deadbeat ex-husbands had escaped prosecution. I saw police refusing to enforce no-contact orders against abusive partners, and I learned the most powerful club for business people was closed to women. Sex discrimination knows no geographical boundaries, but nor do courage and conviction. In places where women have identified a wrongdoing and organized against it, there are at least efforts to conceal it. In small-town Iowa, on the other hand, openly challenging a powerful man such as the police chief or high school coach can leave a woman isolated and marginalized. That makes the courage of those in these stories who have done so all the more noteworthy. This book is a tribute to them. Iowans joke about Iowa nice, which at its worst can mean a reluctance to make waves. On the flip side, there's a spirit of selflessness and sisterhood here that no amount of self-righteous grandstanding elsewhere could match. It can be found in women's breakfast and book clubs and potlucks, convened by a former Des Moines Register columnist, Julie Gamak, to allow women to learn from and support one another. It shows up in lighthearted venues such as comedy. Iowans typically don't want acknowledgement for their heroism. In these pages, you'll meet a woman who went looking for someone to donate a kidney to. A teen who has, since age 10, raised money for people in need. And a woman who adopted a teenager with his mother's blessings just to give him an education. You will read about women enduring unfathomable hardships with courage and about activists whose advocacy began not from theoretical discourse, but from a personal experience, such as living next to a hog confinement or being denied a mammogram. We learn through women's eyes the wrong-headedness of immigration policy or of factory farms. We see differential standards of justice and the ripple effects of poverty and sexual abuse. These columns span 20 years, so there are some updates to report. The transgender Casey Gradishnig, whose story is on page 15, is now a guy. Judy Bradshaw, the hip cop spotlighted on page 21, is now Des Moines police chief. Well, no longer. Joanne Saylor, the juror you'll meet on page 123, who came under fire for deadlocking a jury that was considering murder charges against a new mother, may have been onto something. Though Heidi Anfinson was eventually convicted, her story opened eyes to the realities of postpartum depression. I've been privileged to meet and interview inspiring national women's leaders when they've come through Iowa, and some are included in this collection. Among them are feminist icon Gloria Steinem, Dead Man Walking author Sister Helen Prejean, Nuns on the Bus leader Sister Simone Campbell, autistic animal rights activist Temple Grandin, and Zoya, a young Afghan revolutionary. I'm grateful to all who have helped educate me, but to none more than a girl I wrote about when she was a high school student, who told me of being raped at her school and then expelled for mouthing off in anger because nothing happened to the boy who did it. He was later accused of raping another girl at another school. I blasted the school for punishing a rape victim. 15 years later, the girl called me. She had left Des Moines and pulled her life together. She said she'd carried the column around since 1998, and that knowing someone believed her was often the only thing that prevented her from killing herself. It drove home exactly how much is at stake when women are silenced, and why it's critical to give voice to their stories. So, I think I'll start with, I'm going to start with this one because we've been talking about police brutality, and many of you will remember this case. It wasn't police exactly, it was security guards in the killing of Charles Lovelady in Des Moines.
Oh, yeah.
This was written in April 18th, year 2000, and the headline is, Joanne Hughes' son is dead, and this is what she's left with. She stood out in the rain on the south steps of the Polk County Courthouse, protected only by a hooded white jacket, alone in a crowd of marchers. Someone pointed her out as Charles Lovelady's mother. She looked bewildered and small, as if she didn't quite get it, how she came to be here on this desolate Sunday evening, how people came to be holding up her son's picture and calling out his name, and how it came to be that her son was dead. As speakers spoke, she listened, and when they marched, she marched too, propped up on either side. Occasionally, someone came and hugged her, and occasionally, tears gave way to full-fledged sobs. Imagine you had a 26-year-old child about to graduate from college, just beginning a career in corrections. And imagine that one night you get a call telling you to get to the hospital, and before you have a chance for even a proper goodbye, you're being told your baby's dead. You hear, you're not sure from whom because everything is a blur now, that your son was killed by 2 bouncers at a bar. But days pass and no one's arrested. You can't figure out why. In fact, you're not even entitled to know who they are because police think they need protection. So they get protection while you shop for a coffin for your child. Now I'm thinking someone was killed and no one was arrested, recalled Lovelady's mother, Joanne Hughes, from her home on Monday. It didn't make any sense. On the radio call-in shows, people make careless, cruel remarks about the safety of these bouncers, as if to suggest your people would rise up and lynch them. The autopsy report 2 weeks later brings no surprise. Homicide, it says. Your son was choked to death. Police themselves shun chokeholds because they are too dangerous, except, I guess, in Staten Island. Now you know justice has to be coming, but suddenly the county's chief prosecutor balks. He'll see what a grand jury has to say about this. The bouncers' names dribble out, but there is no letter, no call, no sign of remorse from the bar or the owners, no sliver of humanity to puncture the agony you feel. All you get are denials and aspersions about what your son might have done to cause this. I've heard so many different things, said Hughes. The only thing that I believe in my heart is that Charles did not provoke this. He did not start a fight with those people. The bar says it will close out of respect for your child, but the next thing you know, it's reopening under a different name. Turns out it was bad publicity they were most concerned about. And then Friday, the bombshell. The grand jury indicted Tom Duber and Jeff Portman only on misdemeanor charges of involuntary manslaughter. At most, they'd get 2 years and a fine. In Iowa, you can do more time for killing an animal. Hughes' attorney, Bob Wright, broke it to her. It was like they ripped my child out of me again, she said. It hurts like no pain I've ever experienced in my life, and it just felt like they didn't think his life was worth anything. He's just a black man. If it were the reverse, and the perpetrators were black, she believed they would do everything in their power to make sure they never saw daylight. Instead, Duber and Portman walked out of the courthouse free men. But Hughes' son is dead. Every day I wake up, it's like, is this really my life, she said? Is this real? I can't believe it. It's still a nightmare to me. I just get, it's just Language fails, just as logic has. Your son has been killed, but the men who killed him are probably not going to jail. Hughes told her attorney she couldn't settle for that. My son was worth the world to me, and I can't let him get away with this. That's not justice. So last weekend, for the first time, she ventured out to a rally to march for justice for Charles. Cars were pulling up, and people were starting to gather. Some wore yellow ribbons. At first, there was a solemn silence, pierced only by the whistling of a low, haunting tune. A black child held up a sign asking, "How much is a black life worth?" A young black man had one declaring, "Young black men, endangered species." Every time a person of color, in the face of allegations of discriminatory dress codes in bars and restaurants and discriminatory practices in stores, raises a question about disparate treatment, a chorus of voices rains down to discredit it. But when you put yourself in this mother's shoes, what else are you supposed to conclude but that there are differential systems of justice? How else to explain why your child is dead and the two people who killed him will probably escape with a slap on the wrist? The outside of Joanne Hughes' southeast side home is decorated with a yellow wreath. A picture of Charles Lovelady greets you from a window. His mother wears a yellow lapel pin with his name on it. She chose yellow, says Hughes, to match her son's warmth and energy. Yellow like the sun, yellow for hope. She moves her hand up close to her heart when she says that. But you know now what that yellow has to stand for, she asks. Justice. Until we have that, how can he be at peace? It's amazing how little things change.
What year again was that?
2000. Well, is the one about you in here? I don't know. Thinking it should be.
What's that?
I'm Gloria. She's great, and she. I'm wondering. It's about climate change, and she's an activist, and we wrote about her, and I don't know if it's in here. Maybe you can look for it, and in the meantime, I'll read another one. So let's do. This one was written in 2004. It's called No Justice in Locking Up Poor Mother. One way or another, being poor is a catch-22. You can't afford a doctor, so you wait until you're really sick and then chalk up a hospital bill that's harder to pay if you're laid up and not earning. You can't afford a car to go to the supermarket, so you shop at the nearby convenience store where prices are doubled. And that's less money you're left with to someday buy a car. If you shop on credit because you don't have cash, you get socked with exorbitant interest fees. Instead of getting ahead, you're running in place or moving backward. And when one safeguard breaks down, the thread that holds the rest together can come unraveled. For Ramona Menton, a single 32-year-old mother and member of the working poor, the dominoes started falling years ago when she began chalking up traffic fines she couldn't pay. The sequence ended last week at the prison gates. She lost her driver's license because of the unpaid fines. She drove anyway, setting in motion other violations that culminated in a 4-year prison sentence. Now Menton is off the payroll, and someone else will have to raise her 3- and 12-year-old children. Menton, a 1990 North High graduate with an associate degree in business, was supporting her children through temporary work in accounting. She's far from blameless. She can't seem to stay out of trouble, continuing to drive when instructed not to and ignoring the snowballing charges. But she didn't drive drunk or recklessly. At worst, she drove 11 miles above the speed limit and didn't wear a seatbelt. Is society really served by putting her away? Unable to pay fines that had amounted to around $2,000, her lawyer says, she had her license repeatedly suspended by the Iowa Department of Transportation. But she needed to get to work and to pick up her kids. And, as her lawyer notes, there aren't many options in a city with limited public transportation. Without a valid license, she couldn't get a registration or insurance. Menton was convicted twice of driving with her license barred, an aggravated misdemeanor that carries a 2-year sentence. She was labeled a habitual offender. That law was lenient at first. She got probation and suspended sentences, but the last straw was when she was stopped on a moving violation, which was later dropped. She was going to pick up her child who had missed the bus. Officers saw that a warrant had been issued over her failure to appear in court on a charge of driving while barred. This time, it was prison. Unless she gets an early parole release, her children will be 7 and 16 by the time she's out. The Drake Legal Clinic handled Menton's defense in the most recent case. Bob Rigg, the clinic's director of criminal defense, says there are hundreds of people in Menton's situation, having licenses suspended because they can't pay fines. Quote, a lot of people are working hard to maintain themselves at virtually poverty levels, he said. So if you get dinged, you can send your kid to the doctor or pay your fines. He doesn't fault the judge or county attorney. He blames the Iowa law that allows the DOT to take away people's licenses for unpaid fines. It was passed about 19 years ago by legislators who wanted more uniformity between jurisdictions, says Polk County Attorney John Sarcone. Sarcone says when it comes to driving with a suspended license, some people are flagrant violators. But to Rigg, the issue is why their licenses have to be suspended in the first place. He believes penalties for non-payment should be left to a judge's discretion, not a state bureaucrat's, and that suspensions should be for serious safety violations. It's obvious the law wasn't written with poor folks in mind. While the system shouldn't reward people for disregarding the law, let's keep this in perspective. It's one thing to break it maliciously and put others at risk, and another to do it out of hardship. Menton's license wasn't suspended for recklessness. It was over fines she couldn't pay, and she got sucked into a downward spiral of deeper and deeper trouble. Rigg points out that it costs $20,000 to keep an inmate in prison for a year, and space is limited. He doesn't think locking up someone in Menton's situation is the best use of scarce resources. There are 70 ways people can lose their licenses, and Sarcone suggests a larger review of all of them. His office recently instituted a payment plan for overdue fees during which the suspensions are lifted. It's too late for Menton, though. She ought to be required to make restitution and maybe do community service. Rigg would even settle for a halfway house. But prison? When she gets out as an ex-convict, she'll have an even tougher time finding a job and making a living. Her network will be ex-offenders. Her children will have been raised without a parent. All so society could be safe from a poor mother who couldn't pay her fines. Did you find it?
Yeah, page 40.
Page 40. We have a celebrity in our midst, so we're going to read a poem about her. Thank you. This was written more recently, June 26, 2011, and the headline is, who do these kids think they are? What's happening to Iowa's kids? They don't seem to know their place anymore. They keep showing up at public hearings and blabbing about what's right and wrong as if they have a clue. Or right. It happened again Tuesday when a 13-year-old girl had the audacity to give a PowerPoint presentation on global warming at a meeting of the Iowa Environmental Protection Commission. Naturally, she had to be put in her place. The kid is Gloria Dea Filipponi. She's the Iowa spokesperson for iMatter, Kids versus Global Warming. She said she became a vegetarian at an early age after reading a book about animals being killed for rennet. I don't think I had ever heard that word before I was 12. She also started a recycling
Rennet
program.
is
She complained about
An
not being able
ingredient
to
that is
swim in her
used to
polluted
turn
neighborhood
milk into
lake.
cheese.
Then she got into climate change, retreating glaciers and acidifying oceans, concluding with suggestions for adding a carbon tax and eliminating fossil fuel subsidies, among other things. Shouldn't she have been at the movies talking on an iPhone, like others her age? The commission listened politely, and afterwards, in video, captured by Des Moines filmmaker Kent Newman, Chairman Dave Petty set Gloria Dea straight about her vegetarianism. The Republican cattle farmer from Eldora said he really couldn't listen to anything else she said. Quote, "To be right honest, that's when you lost me in your presentation, is when you mentioned the word vegetarian."
What a slam.
Petty then said his daughter could put some sense into the speaker if they met. His daughter was going to put sense in it. She will, quote, "She will absolutely convince you that you are wrong on that," he said. Uppity kids are everywhere, though. A few weeks ago, State Senator Sean Hammerlink had 5 student leaders from the public universities to, quote, "go back home," after they turned up at a capital budget hearing to whine about tuition increases. As if that's any of their business. Hammerlink, a Republican from Dixon, chided them for creating political fear and said he dislikes it when students, quote, "actually come here and lobby me for funds." But the pesky students were back last week with a letter signed by more than 1,000 people objecting to his remarks. This virus young Iowans are
Typical
catching may have
Republicans.
started last winter with Zach Walls, 19, a University of Iowa engineering student who testified at the legislature against a bill to amend the Iowa Constitution to ban same-sex marriage. Walls said he was conceived by artificial insemination and raised by 2 mothers. He said he's an Eagle Scout and operates his own business. Quote, "The sexual orientation of my parents has 0 impact on the content of my character," he said. And, quote, "If I was your son, Mr. Chairman, I believe I'd make you very proud." How dare he try to make a political matter personal? What was his point, to try to embarrass lawmakers who have told us same-sex marriages can't produce children? Does he presume to know better? But the Republican-dominated House didn't let him get under their skins. They went right ahead and passed the resolution. Life would be a lot easier on many officials if young people would just shut up. And some might, if a national effort to require photo IDs of all voters is successful. That could make it harder for young people to vote, since about 18% of them don't have one. It's not like you can just ignore these kids who seem to think this is their Arab Spring or something. You shut them up in one place and they're popping up someplace else. Thank God.
This is the American Friends Service Committee meeting house where
Update?
we're in their
We're
worship
actually ended up
space.
suing the state of Iowa for not protecting the atmosphere, and we lost the lawsuit. No,
And no, we appealed and we lost the appeal after we lost the lawsuit. And so we're
Appealing up a level?
Is going to sue under different grounds.
Well,
Was it just you? You personally sued, or was it a group?
Well, she sued with, and I was her co-plaintiff for Iowa. And she was a plaintiff on the federal lawsuit as well. But she was the only plaintiff in Iowa, but there are other state lawsuits. And actually, like in New Mexico and Texas even, they've gotten more, and Washington gotten further in their lawsuits than we did.
take it up to class action level, maybe? Yeah.
Very cool, though. 13 years old.
Yeah.
This piece was written. Amazing.
I'm still going at it.
Still going at it. I think I will read maybe one more. Give it a break. So I think we'll go abroad now. This one, well, I didn't go abroad. I just interviewed someone. This one was published in October of 2009, and the headline is, "Out of Tragedy, a Revolutionary is Born." As the young Afghan woman saw it, she had three choices in the face of the repression and violence that had killed both of her parents and turned her country into a chess game between superpowers and fundamentalists. She could flee to America to live with relatives. She could commit suicide, as so many other despondent young Afghans were doing. Or she could do what she did and take what she calls the way of struggle, by joining the resistance. Resistance had been the path of her mother, an activist with the Underground Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan, RAWA, who was assassinated when Zoya was 14. That's the organization Zoya joined. Now 28, she goes by a pseudonym because she's a target of extremists. She was in Des Moines this week, appealing for what some Americans might find surprising given her opposition to the terrorists, an end to the U.S. occupation and war. The U.S. government has claimed credit for ousting the Taliban and liberating Afghanistan's people. But after 8 years of growing violence on all sides, and with the Taliban still in control of 80% of the country, Zoya says it's time for us to leave. Born as the Soviets were coming to power in Afghanistan, she has known only occupation of some form her whole life. After her parents' deaths, she moved to Pakistan with a grandmother, where she was educated in a Rawa school and studied law. For all the fight and fearlessness in her, she is still a motherless child with a vulnerability that makes you want to hug her or give her cough drops, as my colleague Linda did after hearing she had a cold. The word revolutionary conjures up images of armed warfare, but RAWA is a pacifist organization doing political and social work. Founded in 1977 to give voice to women, it now claims 2,000 members. Early on, it campaigned against the Russian forces and Russian-backed government. But many Afghans feel the U.S. turned its back on Afghanistan after the fall of the Soviet Union left a void into which the Taliban and other fundamentalist groups we had supported stepped. Quote, "We saw floggings and stonings to death," recounted Zoya. "The doors of those schools were called gateways to hell, and computers were called devil boxes. The first image smuggled out of Afghanistan of Taliban leaders executing a woman in a public stadium were taken by RAWA members with a hidden video camera. Members have turned their burqas, imposed by the Taliban to keep them covered head to toe, into advantages. RAWA is funded by donors, international non-governmental organizations, and homespun businesses run by members. It operates schools, orphanages, and mobile health units. And it offers an inspiring counterpart to the impression of Afghan women as silenced and immobilized. The 2001 U.S. invasion in pursuit of Osama bin Laden routed Taliban from the capital city of Kabul, but some 34 provinces remain under Taliban rule. Occupying governments may have their strategic long-term interests, but Zoya's appeal is to the American people. I've met many interesting people on this job, but seldom has a subject moved me as Zoya did in her direct, smart, unassuming way. She isn't seeking personal glory. When book authors John Follane and Rita Cristofari asked to tell her story, she balked. The struggle wasn't about her, she insisted. But she collaborated with Zoya's story, An Afghan Woman's Struggle for Freedom, which was published in 2003 by HarperCollins, to help promote the cause. The struggle is, of course, much bigger than one person, but seeing it through the lens of this one makes it both personal and poignant and gives it particular urgency.
Well, thank you. On behalf of everybody here, and if you didn't get a chance to sign the card, you might have it at the table there, and you can sign it. And a peace lily. Oh. If we could have found a peace and justice lily, that's what we would have done. Thank you. books, a few signings, right?
My son is there waiting to take your money.
And lots of good refreshments still, so.
Thank you. Thank you for this one.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
I showed you the book earlier, but this belongs to someone else, but I'll pick it up again. Rekha Basu, Finding Her Voice. That is the title of the book. And she read it's a collection of columns she wrote for the Des Moines Register. And over her 20-year career here in Des Moines. And so the American Friends Service Committee decided to hold this reception in her honor to thank her and to promote the book. And there are copies available for people to purchase, and she will sign them. So I just wanted to show you that again for those who missed it when I showed it to you earlier. Now people are just going to chat and enjoy the goodies and have their books signed. And those who want to buy a copy will do so. And the guy behind the table is her son. So I just thought I'd go ahead and stream this so that the wider audience around the world can hear some of these. And see that there is someone who has been writing about this is about women's issues, this particular book, but she has written on a number of things, very well received, despite the haters. She wrote extensively on GMOs and corporate ag leading up to World Food Prize week and Occupy the World Food Prize, and she had come out to the Occupy Des Moines camp a few times, and to some of our protests she's come out to and wrote about. And she's written about corruption, all kinds of things that the local activist community really go for. And so I definitely want to come out because I met her personally. She has interviewed me before. So I just had to come out here, and I just felt like streaming it and bringing it to the world. I'm just going to grab my cup.
Put in their we lobbied there. And also in Jerusalem, so it's all Japanese and then I was there previously in 2011.
So you are your mother's son.
Yes, good to see you again.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, your mother is very good. I have loved reading her stuff. She has interviewed me, at Occupy events in the past. So yeah,
She is a great lady.
and she's going to go places. Even if she leaves the register someday, she's still going to go places. Do you know if the book will be wider available? Do you know where it can be sold
I'm actually
at?
not sure. I'll have to ask.
Yeah.
I think Beaverdale Books sells it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
You can still buy it at Beaverdale Books.
Oh, cool. Beaverdale Books is a bookseller here in Des Moines. It's an independent store. I went to book talk by Naomi Porter from Food and Water Watch, and she wrote a book called about GMOs and corporate ag, and so I went over to that store to live stream that book talk. I'm just going to come over here and get another cup of tea. Oops, dropped the tea box. I'm going to get the last one of this. I took the last one of this one, but there's okay. It's good tea. It's limeade. Yeah, that's limeade. And this is the bag right here that.
What's that?
I'm just going to roam around and capture discussions and conversation. Maybe steal a cookie.
Good. Well, I hope she enjoys it, and I'd love to come to the Tiger House sometime. Maybe sometime when you're having a actress in Happy holidays to you. I have more at home down the street.
Your son said they were at Beaverdale, right? Beaverdale Books?
There are some
Okay.
Beaverdale books, exactly.
Okay, good. That'll be good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And
The downtown bookstore had it, but that's gone out of business.
My daughter's name, Kara, K-A-R-A.
Do you have the card? Yeah, I'm gonna. And can I borrow the pen too? I'm going to sign this card. I'll show it to you first. Just thank you. And inside, as you can see, all kind people have signed it, left little notes. So I'm going to go ahead and sit and scratch.
That's one last bow I have to buy. Yes, that is awesome.
I had a chance to get it from my mom, like her, like just like a dress up, you know,
Yes.
like in her attic, all
No,
that
the
stuff.
bow is amazing because those are $6 a piece for some reason. For God's sakes. I'm gonna go online. I'm gonna try to find something like good, but a good company.
I wrote keep rocking it up across the top and sign my name underneath it.
You're welcome, Erica. I'll keep looking too.
Okay, and I come in.
You too. Are you going to the party on
I can't. I want to, but I have to take my mom to Rochester. So
Here's the card. I signed it.
I hate missing get-togethers. It's like my favorite thing.
Yeah, I chicken scratched. You might have to start on the back. You can do it on the back.
You know, as a mom, I don't know what your best schedule is. Either a lunchtime
Yeah, that,
or
yeah, I can do it right here. This is a good spot.
something.
That would be really fun, like a social. Yeah, I would love that.
I want to donate to, like, I don't really know you guys. Nobody was around here back in the
I just picked someone's pen that fell on the floor. I picked that up. I'm just waiting for my tea to steep. And again, this is at the American Friends Service Committee Meeting House, their worship space, and reception for Rekha Basu, reporter and editorialist at the Des Moines Register. And this is to thank her for the writing that she's done and for her book. finding her voice. She is autographing the books. All of them that she brought here have been spoken for, but for those who will see this locally, this is available at Beaverdale Books, which is, yeah, I'm live streaming. Yeah.
Did you record this whole thing?
Well, just when she started, when Kathleen introduced her, that's when I started the live stream.
So you got how much of it?
All of it, so far.
Good, you did.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. But I just waited till Kathleen introduced her to...
Sure. Because we didn't know how long Kathleen would talk.
Well, and, we waited for her to get ready and all that. Just people were just getting their goodies. And
Yeah.
so...
Well, thanks for coming.
Yep.
Come to meetings sometime if you like, at 10 o'clock. Where do you go on Sunday morning?
I'm a Muslim, so I go to the mosque on 42nd Street.
To the mosque.
Yeah, I go to the 42nd Street Mosque.
Do you know Khalid?
Who?
Khalid Khan?
Khalid Khan?
Yeah.
One of the grandsons of Muhammad Khan? Or a different one?
No, it's a different one.
Oh, okay, because...
Muhammad, too.
Yeah, Muhammad Khan, I have known him for... Yeah, he is a co-owner of the Hilal Grocery on 25th Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you know Ibrahim?
Ibrahim, the little boy?
Texas?
Oh.
No, the one who went to Texas.
No, I don't know him.
Yeah, he was here before that. Anyway.
Yeah, this Khalid Khan, I don't know the one that you're speaking of. I only know the one who is, a grandson of Muhammad and Betty Khan, co-owners of the Hilal Grocery. No, Muhammad was a professor at Iowa State. He retired from Iowa State.
That's who I'm thinking of.
He taught agronomy.
Yeah. Well, this is Charlie. Yes, how are you, Lucy? I forgot you don't recognize. You can't see you.
I can't see,
Good.
but I heard your voice.
Yeah.
I know Charlie.
And hi, Chet Gwynn here.
Hi, Chad. How are you?
I just couldn't be better.
Over here is just some things about the Palestine and some of the things that the American Friends Service Committee have been working on. This image has been circulated on social media. I'm hoping to see a 2014 update of this. But this is another... The crisis in Gaza is far from over, which is definitely true, considering what is going on. It's about boycotting those companies that do business with the Israeli military. Hearts wide open. Interning and volunteering for lasting peace and justice, and I'll turn it this way so that the man in the picture is standing upright. He's one of the volunteers, and just other things.
I am not. I was working on the Brightly campaign. So figuring out the next steps.
Another about boycott, divestment, and sanctions, or otherwise known as BDS. That's just some of the peace things that American Friends Service Committee does. And because Rekha Basu has written about peace and justice issues, it's only right that those things are included here. And there's a form for more information about the American Friends Service Committee. Sign that, and when they do protests, I find out about those and I live stream them, so I'm already on their mailing list. And if they post on Facebook of an action, if I can get to it, I go there. I'm going to check the chat. So, if any of you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. This is some people may be leaving early.
Thank you again.
You're welcome. Oh, I think she was talking to someone else, but I happened to be there.
And I can't remember, probably as a Secretary of State, somebody, probably within the family.
This is Father Polish, who is a priest who recently had a kidney transplant, and his sister donated. Perfect match. And he has been active in social causes and social justice. And he was the one who worked with us last year on when we had Cardinal Peter Turkson for Occupy the World Food Prize. Being a Muslim, I get that kind of crap a lot. So the way I figure it, if someone's going to throw the hate on, it's your problem, dude, not mine. Yep, haters are going to hate, but if someone says some crap like that, I just ignore it. Don't give them the dignity of a response, because that's what they're after.
Yeah. How you doing? Wednesday work for you? Sorry, you were saying something.
Yeah. I read the liturgy.
Yeah, I'm sure my friends who went to Palestine have gotten a hate email.
No, she doesn't.
But, they'll do it again. Even though Jess got denied this time.
And you know what? A lot of times it seems like a lot of these folks are anonymous.
Yeah.
You know, when they write letters, they don't sign or emails and stuff.
Yeah, or they just use some fake name or nickname or something like that.
Well, I got to
You
go.
gotta try to write it so you didn't offend this person. You gotta say really bad about
See you. Yeah, thanks.
Now I'm ready.
So now tell me your name again. Jody. Jody J. Jody. Why? Ready?
Sorry.
So you're driving back tonight? Yeah. Well, you work for a really great organization. Especially when it's late. I just can imagine.
I feel you on that one.
You are so well. So good to meet you. Oh, you're most welcome. And keep up the great work. And that's awesome. I'm going off to India right after Christmas, on New Year's, so I'll be back in the middle of January. And after that, contact me. We'll do lunch. Okay. I would never do that, but I was just like, we will definitely have lunch. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you. Good to see you. Thank you.
I hope you have a little bit of fun while you're over there.
Oh, I will.
Yeah, try to have a little fun.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes, she said she is going to India for a vacation.
I'm going to India.
She has relatives in India, so that's where she's going to visit them. I have seen this other woman at the event. She came to Occupy the World Food Prize events.
It was actually a lot easier than I expected. I did a lot sooner.
Well, I will.
It was.
Okay, and read to her, please. Otherwise, you call me and I'll read to you over the phone.
There you go.
All right.
So I didn't have to ask.
That could be a good thing for to be read on the iris.
have.
I know. We used to. Yeah, we went in and did that once, Rob and I, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, I mean, now that you have this new book, maybe hit them up, see if they'll read it.
That's it too, no doubt.
Take good care, and my fond wishes to your sister, and I'm really sorry that she's not feeling well.
So, that was, I can strike that off on the bucket list.
Iris is Iowa Radio reading
I'd love to hear your experience.
Sorry, totally like Erica.
service, and it is a special radio channel
Yeah, like exactly what
that some TVs actually pick up because it runs over a digital signal, and it is for blind people and those who are functionally illiterate because of dyslexia or their brains just cannot process text. So I suggested that she have her book read over that so that those people who cannot read print and cannot get it in Braille, because it's just newly published, can actually hear it and listen to these columns that she has written over her career.
I think that's
Anyway,
concerned. When I was going to India for just a couple of weeks ago in the New Year's.
Well, the crowd is thinned out here.
You did. My mother lives there. Impersonations. He had done this like. Were you? My father was from California.
So I think this is a good event, good social time,
But anyway, he was leaving.
something to do on a Monday night.
We were having this party, and so
I think I'm going to go ahead and shut this down.
that was Elvis.
But before I do, I want to thank you for watching, and please check out my donation links below. If you're watching on Ustream directly, it is below the video view window. And for those who cannot see that because they're watching on a restream channel, and I think any channels that may have picked up my feed and rebroadcast it. So www.gofundme.com/occupierkaylin. That's KAYLYNN. Again, www.gofundme.com/occupierkaylin. Or if you cannot access GoFundMe, but you can access PayPal, www.paypal.com, and in the send money to line, enter the email address strainsop@aol.com. Again, www.paypal.com, and in the send money to line, enter the email address strainsop@aol.com. That will help me cover the cost of my live streaming and broadcasting, so I can continue to bring you these events live and uncut. I like to do these social type events as well as the protests as a way to bring new things to the viewers and then make a little variety.
The two other parishes are very small. Osceola is doubled in the last
And
few years because of
some are taking a picture with Rekha.
So, but
Looks great.
Excellent, thank you.
How about mother and son together? You got to do that.
I think there's enough of those.
Oh, camera shy. I'm just teasing your son. And again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the stream.